So what we're going to do today, we don't have a lot of time, and I think that knowing that we're going to see each other for the next day and a half, I want to be able to use this as a way to start that discussion and start having this discussion about the different generations. So really exciting topics. I'm all into the trends, the fads, dumped a ton of money on NFTs, dumped a ton of money on comic books, went to go see the recap of the Travis Scott Fortnite concerts. Kids these days are judging me on grading Pokemon cards, which is dumb, and I get called out on Call of Duty for not using bet, lock-in, any of those terms, and I'm just slow. But this group is great. I'm just going to give some time for each of you to introduce yourselves, what sort of impact that you're making in the moment, key projects or milestones that everybody should kind of know about.
Sure. Hi, I'm Dan Box. I work at EA, so we're a video game company. A lot of our focus, though, is trying to find new ways to entertain our fans beyond the games that we have today. We have many, many millions of people who play those games, but we think a lot of our growth as a company will come through delivering experiences that are not games, but connecting the younger demographic to interactive entertainment in different ways. So I get to work with a lot of really talented, creative people building video games and some of these new experiences that connect to video games. And I get the fortune of being the popular parent that enters the schoolyard when they find out that I work at EA and they want a free copy of FC or whatever video game it is. So it's not a bad job.
Brandon?
Hi, I'm Brandon. So currently I work at AXON, which does public safety. Doesn't have a whole lot to do with Gen Z. But my past experiences have been at Disney doing immersive experiences, Microsoft work on HoloLens, more immersive experiences for museums, television series, and all types of, weird installations and things like that. So I've had a lot of fun and work towards just working AR, VR, and getting towards sentient environments. Now I'm questioning so much of my work nowadays, which we'll get into conversation. That's on Brenda.
Hi, my name is Brenda. Currently, I'm an independent immersive media director. I love working at the intersection of art, tech, music, and gaming to create experiences that bridge our physical and virtual worlds. In the past, I was working at a startup called WaveXR, where I directed virtual concerts for artists like Justin Bieber, John Legend, and created real-time music visuals for The Weeknd and other artists. Outside of virtual concerts, I also creative direct and build VR, AR experiences, interactive installations, and games in collaboration with brands like Nike, The Getty, Verizon, and more. Yeah.
Great, thanks. Again, just for the efficiency of time, I'm really only going to cover two major questions with this group, and I'd love for dialogue to happen amongst the three, and then hopefully continued on to the rest of the night, the rest of the other 2 days. First off, I think we are often intersecting in a lot of technological spaces with the Gen Z, Gen Alpha generations, and then also, we're trying to predict or see patterns out of their habits, behaviors. So for the three of you, are there some very obvious patterns and habits in the, discovering technology, discovering immersive experiences perspective, and are there any sort of not so obvious that you're getting picked up in the line of work that you're all in?
Sure. I'll start with the obvious ones. Everything we build has to be social in some kind of construct. We know that people, when they enjoy entertainment, they enjoy it a lot more when they're doing it with their friends or with a community that they're part of. And a lot of what means the community now means the creators that are feeding that community. So we know that as it relates to even just sports, which is one area that we focus a lot on, 60% of people will watch sports with a friend versus not watch. So of that 60%, almost half of it, they would not watch sports if they did not have a friend to watch it with. We also know in our games, when somebody has a connection with at least 2 friends, they spend 4 times the amount of time in that game. So people really enjoy entertainment when they're doing it with their friends. And then as it relates to the community, we know that 65% of people who enjoy entertainment of a Gen Z or younger demographic will listen to a creator or a community driven by a creator before they would listen to anyone from their family or even one of their direct friends. So the role of a creator and the importance of a community is creating a huge amount of engagement with the younger demographic. And we know, as it relates just to video games, I think over 75% of teens consume generated content from a community. So user-generated content or user-generated experiences. So that engagement with friends and that engagement with content from the community is really what's driving deeper engagement beyond previous generations.
I had one little question for you, follow-up to that, which is, do you see a big difference between, I'll say, like more old school gaming, where a bunch of kids were in the same room playing, versus now it's separate? Is that engagement better or worse in either or?
It's both, but there's so much more like non-local social engagement, like multiple screens with FaceTime or some form of chat with games on TV, with like mobile phones as well. So that kind of couch play is still part of it, but nowhere near the scale of that non-couch play.
Yeah, and I can add, so I'd worked on a series called The Ocean Explorers, which is on Disney+, you can watch it now. But through that whole experience, we're trying to get inspire Gen Z. And Gen Z will say a lot how much they love climate change and how excited they are for that. And for that series, we wanted to say, okay, let's inspire them and get them out doing something to help change our oceans or whatnot. So one of the first, and this is a partnership with James Cameron. It's supposed to be released with Avatar, and we're supposed to have a museum. So the idea was we release it right when the new Avatar came out, which was now 2 years ago. This docuseries was released late, didn't work out. But we'd get these kids excited for Avatar, and then we bring them into this docuseries, then get to see these real scientists around there, and also trying to do watch parties, and we're trying to integrate HoloLens and these things, and then pushing out this global museum of now bringing those kids into real physical space and having this engagement, and trying to really create a story and bringing all these kids along the way to hopefully inspire the next generation so that they participate more and become more active members in our society and actually have an impact with that. And sometimes I think, that's a really complicated way of approaching this for all these kids. There's probably simpler ways to inspire them. And we'll see if it's actually successful. I have no metrics to report back on that, by the way. So that was all in just like what we did, but we have no like real measurements around that. But anyways, that's just kind of where I'm thinking of how do we engage right now, and that's I think an exciting example.
Yeah, I guess in my work, I'm actually seeing kind of like the pendulum swing in the other direction, where people, especially in Gen Z generation, are moving away from like virtual experiences. Like virtual concerts aren't really as famous anymore, and now going back to like real life, now that the pandemic is over, and going to like live concerts more. And even like, I feel like people are using social media a lot less, because now people are starting to like create apps like 222 Place, which is in LA, or like Time Left, that are kind of getting people to meet up in person. There's like less use of dating apps, and so it's kind of swinging in that other direction. But I mean, technology is still like widely used. Like it's dependent on tech to make it work. For example, like the Time Left app, you're using an algorithm to match you up with like other people that you then go out to dinner with to meet in person. It's kind of the same with like the 222 app. But that's for Gen Z. With Gen Alpha, I'm noticing there's still this like, they basically live like in the virtual world. It was actually kind of funny at South by, we did a similar panel about like Roblox and Gen Alpha, and a school teacher came up to us afterwards and was kind of angry, and she was talking about how, oh, my kindergarten students don't know how to interact with each other. They're always on Roblox, they don't know how to communicate. And she was really worried about like the future generation and how, especially during the pandemic, they're not interacting with other children, they're only interacting through Roblox, and so their Roblox avatar is a literal extension of who they are, and that's who they are. So yeah, it's different for each generation.
It's kind of wild because I think we, not to say that I assume I understand it all, like we kind of are trying to still get a grasp of what's happening with people's behaviors and this new generation's behaviors with social. When we all kind of had an intro catch up together, I brought up this notion of we're sensing a lot of non-digital, this low tech. I know that friends and friends of friends and their sisters and brothers are doing like low-tech Sundays, no-tech Sundays. I was in Japan, and people were hoarding over 1 megapixel cameras. And so there's this kind of like reverse, but then to all of what you are saying is they're also, like, tech is now living in their everyday life. They're just being kind of conscious to, remove themselves from certain, maybe certain influences, but still, like, taken on Instagram during dinner time. Everybody's hearing the BeReal sounds and whatnot. So anything to add to this before we kind of move into the digital engagement part, but any other patterns that you're sensing from the non-digital, kind of removing themselves from digital areas?
I just don't see it as much. I mean, I see the examples that get like highlighted when we talk about it. I just don't know how pervasive it really is at scale. Like when we look just at games, they're just games, but they're also pretty pervasive in terms of culture in general for that demographic. All we see is increased engagement at every level, and the younger, the numbers are going up and up. So our focus, again, we do a lot of work in sports. A lot of our focus is trying to manage that in a kind of responsible way. Like, sure, you can play games and we'll do our best to make them safe and whatnot, but we'll also encourage you to spend time out of the game, whether it's like playing soccer, running a mile, do something outside, you'd be rewarded. Even if you're rewarded in-game, at least we're trying to create the balance between physical activity and virtual activity.
I was just say, how are you encouraging them, though? Like, how did that crossover?
So for one example is with a partnership with Nike on our Madden franchise, we reward people, which has a focus maybe on younger, for going out and actually running miles, playing sport with trackable devices and other forms of technology, and they record those miles they run, all that calories they burn, all that time they spend exercising in the real world, and they get value and rewards in the game as well. But it's encouraging them not just to play Madden on the TV, but also to play flag in the field or to run around with their friends or do something like that. Not because that's like the solution, but trying to like point them somewhat towards real world activity is a positive thing as well.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. At least when I used to play Tony Hawk Pro Skater, if anybody played that. But we would totally, that's how we like learn the name of the tricks, and we go out and go do it and then come back. But it wasn't measured, but it's cool. Yeah.
So this is actually a really good transition to the second question out of this whole thing is just around, this whole 3 days, the theme and concepts have been like mindfulness and freeing your mind and having space for these new things. Like with regards to all of the immersive tech and creating new innovations for a new generation, what have you all been doing, or the groups and companies that you're doing, to kind of push for this mindfulness or this connectedness? And again, transitioning is, when we chatted, I remember Brenda saying, like, there's a like physical part that merges to the digital part, and then what Dan just said, it goes from the digital part to the physical part, and it's just like a continuous loop where you're kind of living in that space continuously. So again, too short, mindfulness, positivity in a world that is such over-connected, and with younger generation who are just now living with phones, devices, games, like it's constant, right? So.
Yeah, I guess for me, I've started to be more interested in technology that kind of takes the digital world into the physical world. So for example, I was working in virtual concerts before, so we're taking the physical artist and putting it into a virtual world, and then everyone's going into this virtual world to watch a concert. But now I'm kind of more interested in like doing like live music visuals where we're all in a physical space together, but we're, I guess, witnessing a virtual experience like through a screen. Or for example, like Coachella's doing a lot of work with immersive media, integrating like AR and stuff like that, and there's new technologies in LED technology, sorry, I said technology twice, where people can look at the same screen, but they're seeing different things. So kind of how do we use technology as a way to enhance like the physical world versus like taking the physical world into the virtual world is stuff that I'm interested in right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll add, I guess, more of actually so I worked at a company called Genies, and the focus was on younger females, and this was my first time focusing on that market. And the reason they really wanted to also focus on that market was more, it's like a digital fashion app at the time. And trying to bring those females into a lot of the NFT space is predominantly pretty much guys that look like me, mid-30s, white guys that were a lot of that majority of the space. They're like, how can we target actually this whole sector that maybe isn't really part of that? And I mean, now I reflect back on that, I was like, why would we want that actually? Because a lot of those females already, I mean, we know that like social media and stuff, there's major struggles for, image and things like this that create those issues. But a positive thing that I saw with the kind of interactions and engagements is where we throw these pop-ups around fashion and thrifting and, kind of this, I guess a lot of like 90s is coming back and those kind of fun things and those clothes. And those were those moments where those younger ladies are coming together and actually having these major interactions. And then the idea was, they kind of, maybe an NFT was purchased with this item and then they could interact around that even more so for the future. But at the end of the day, I was like, I think you could simply just do that through your text or sharing it. So I was like, a lot of these technologies are already there. We tend to really want to do so much more with what we have, and in ways I'm just like, I think I would like a lot more mechanisms or policy. Is something I would like to see pushed a lot more across the community for our kids, our nephews, our nieces, all of them to have, because I mean, a bunch of us tech people, we want to make money. You make money or you don't really see it, and then when you like out there and you see the impact it's actually having and how negative, how depressed, how much anxiety, all of these things that we have created from the technologies that we put out and trying to do it in better, more responsible way so we can have positive impact. That's very, very important. Yeah, I haven't really figured out how we're going to do that yet, but it's important. So, yes, yeah.
I don't know if it's mindful of whether it's just, we think we're starting to think more and more about safety. And we used to have a lot of scrutiny on us around the classification or the ratings of the game we make, and are we making them safe for people to consume? Now we're thinking more around, are we making the communities that we build around our games safe? Because again, that is becoming far more influential than the games that we make, is the communities that build around our games. So how do we make sure that when people group and spend time together and interact in and around our game on our platforms or related platforms, that they're safe, whether that's moderation or whatever it might be? That's becoming more and more important. And then I think not just the safety of the community, but also the safety of the people creating the content, because not only did I say something like 75% of teens will consume user-generated content, but of those that do that, 9 out of 10 will start to create their own. So how do we create tools that make that easy, but tools that inherently build safe content that they create and put back into the community? So it's becoming less about the content that we create as a developer and a publisher, and more about the safety of the community around the games.
Right, and that goes back to the whole trend of people are creating, they're forming communities and relationships, friendships together from the games and technology that they're a part of. So kind of comes full circle. So let's just wrap it up. Really, really, really quick question. At the end of the day, we've kind of got to keep an open mind with new generations. We're intersecting with them so many times and in so many different spaces. From each of you, like, what should we collectively here try to not dismiss about what's happening with behaviors, culture in these generations? One example, TechCrunch posted this new Gen Alpha app called Days. It raised like millions of dollars. And I looked at it, and it's basically like a free-form text tool. People can draw, people can put stickers, GIFs. It's AI generated, and my first reaction was like, ew, this looks like Microsoft Paint. Like, ugh. But obviously it's important to keep an open mind and not judge that, because they are then forming their this is now a tool to create those relationships. So, anyways, I don't know, quick thoughts, opinions on what not to dismiss about what's happening in kind of emerging behaviors and trends.
I'm just thinking we're so focused on trying to bring everyone together, but we have way too many tools to do that. So I was like, we do that already. So I'm like all for the live experience. I'm just like, how do we get more people in more rooms, do more of this? But that's So it doesn't really answer your question, but there you go. Yeah.
I think the one thing I'm trying not to dismiss is, and it's maybe ironic coming from a gaming company, is that because the nature of the content and the nature of social media and the nature of everything we're talking about is so addictive. And I can talk about safe communities, and we can talk about all these things. I think we just can't ignore and dismiss that it is just so incredibly addictive. And how do we, at least from my perspective, how do we try to push back as late as possible, that the younger demographic, the younger generations even start to intersect and engage with some of the technology. And I'm obviously very pro-technology, but what I'm trying not to dismiss is just the sheer and very real addictive nature of this stuff.
Great. Brenda, anything else?
Yeah, I think something that resonated with me was like, someone said this like 2 panels ago, but I think I see a lot of like parents and like that school teacher that came up to us that was like, oh, no technology, we need to get kids like off of Roblox, away from AI. But I really agree, like, no, like you should let kids and people use the technology because you're holding them back. If not, I think there just kind of has to be like boundaries put in place. Like, for example, like getting your kid to go out and like play sports and really controlling the narrative around technology not being something that we should be afraid of, but something we can use as a tool to kind of like enhance our lives. And so I see a lot of in my work, like 2 camps. It's either anti-technology or full send technology. And I think being somewhere like in the middle is probably the safest.
Cool, thanks. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your minds. Please continue these conversations.
Thank you.